So now we're going to move on to our first panel of the day as we look to explore the digital audio landscape a little bit further. And don't forget, as we go through this, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll review your questions and put a selection of them to the panel as we go through. So without further ado, I think I can hand over to our panel.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the audio landscape panel. My name is Catherine. I work at IAB UK, and my role over at IAB UK is very much looking after all of our audio work. And I would like to kick off by welcoming our panel. So perhaps if I can invite everybody to introduce themselves in the order of your images on the slide, that would be wonderful.
Hello, I'm Andre Charles Foster, Senior Product and Innovation Manager at Xaxis.
Hello everyone, my name is Goddard. I'm Senior Director of Business Development at DoubleVerify. I'm also the Chair of IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee.
Hi everyone, I'm Diana Romero. I work for the Digital Standards team at PMX Global, looking at all the emerging trends across emerging channels and looking at the standards across them and measurement as well.
Hi everyone. My name is Kumlin. I'm Director of Digital Advertising Technology at Bauer Media Audio, so working with our 8 audio markets in Europe.
Thank you. Just to kick us off, I'd love to just have a bit of a discussion about what Daniel discussed. So really interesting to get that kind of broader overview on the digital audio landscape. And just 2 things that sort of stuck out to me from that presentation is obviously the huge growth in podcasting last year. We saw it in the UK market, but it's certainly across Europe, up 43% in a pandemic year. That is absolutely phenomenal. And also just something that stuck out to me was the share of programmatic in audio was up 77.6%. That is absolutely huge. And I know it's coming from a small base, but that is absolutely stellar growth. And I think both indications as to what the future of audio might look like. And also the piece about mergers and acquisitions over the last year. The landscape's constantly changing around us. But I'd love to throw a question out to the panel and just get your perspective on what did you think about that presentation? Was there anything that surprised you, anything that really resonated, in particular looking at the markets that each of you work across? I will open that one out to the floor.
I don't mind going first on that. To be honest, it rang true for what we saw over 2020, especially the graph showing the different months and the revenue. So we literally probably followed exactly the same kind of trend line of a really strong start to the year, and then obviously the restrictions came in and everybody saw the dip that happened, and then the second half of the year with an accelerated Q4 is what we saw, and even the countries aligned as well. So yeah. So for us at Xaxis, it was rang true, everything that was presented.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what we have seen as well over the past year with the pandemic and the lockdown, consumer behavior definitely changed in the sense that people wanted more a connection with what they were listening and what they were watching. And I think those trends for sure reflect the great opportunity that the audio space provides for everyone. It really opens up that space for brands to really have a closer relationship with consumers. Consumers listen to podcasts, and especially that's true for podcasts. The podcast space provides that sort of close relationship with users where they are listening on the go, they are choosing to listen to specific content, and it provides that sort of brand safety solution, as if you like, for brands to really approach the space. So I think definitely reflects not only what we have seen from a Publicis perspective, but I think it's a global trend as well.
You agree from a publisher point of view. I think I can only echo what you just said. I think exceptional year, of course, last year, but we also saw quite sharp increase actually in audio consumption, and a lot of people rediscovering radio, for instance, when they spend more time at home listening to the new smart speakers, and the first brands that they come to think of when giving their first commands is a radio station that they've listened to before. So I think that companionship, of audio in its different forms, I think really proven strong last year. And then on the numbers, I think it's really good to see more numbers and high quality numbers for the market to analyze. There's less speculation, and we can start to focus on other topics than just trying to understand the basic market.
From my perspective, it was a fantastic analysis and presentation from Daniel, as always. With regards to the future look, I thought it was really exciting to see 2025 a forecasted audio investment of north of 2.6 billion. So I think that's really promising. It's that kind of showcases the excitement around this, emerging channel. I think a number of the topics we're going to talk about around complexity and industry standards all need to be addressed and supported by every industry stakeholder if we want to get close to that kind of 2.6+ billion in 2025 in the audio environment for Europe.
Thanks very much. And before we get onto the sort of really complex side of things, it might just be a good idea to just take a step back and just talk about definitions, just to kick us off. Just before we get into it, could somebody please define for me, what do we mean by digital audio? What does that include in an advertising conversation? Just so we make sure that everybody in our audience is starting on the same page here.
I don't mind doing a real simple one here. Digital audio is a representation of sound and content recorded in or converted into digital form, and includes digital radio, podcasts, emerging voice, integrations, and music streaming. However, Daniel's presentation wasn't including digital radio in that scenario. So I know there's a couple of variations, but that's like at its simplest form. I think the complexity comes into, or is due to, the wide variety of devices that digital audio is consumed on, and the variety of ways, such as downloaded podcasts versus streamed, which make digital audio both a fantastic opportunity, but also an interesting industry challenge.
Great, thank you. And just looking across Europe, maybe I'll ask this question to Andre. How is digital audio currently being bought and sold across Europe? And particularly in your role, are you seeing any key differences across different markets?
Yeah, there's some really interesting differences. So when we look at, Daniel kind of leaned on it, for example, anyway, in the way how kind of Southern and Eastern Europe and how they are less podcast heavy. So the UK side, they are more into podcasts. We saw fantastic podcast growth in revenue wise from the UK, but looking across the markets, there was still growth, but it wasn't the same sort of growth. And I think that has a lot to do with the kind of local market language content that is available. Obviously, there's a proliferation of English speaking content as far as podcast is concerned, but as far as local language content, that's a little bit behind. But as soon as we see that increase, I'm sure podcasting will come more into the other markets. For us as well, we obviously do everything programmatically, so there's no kind of direct IO buys, host reads, stuff. That's not how we buy. So from that perspective, we are growing on that from there. And then, yeah, just again, the main difference that we've seen is around that local language content. A lot of markets asking for more, essentially, to enable the growth. Their advertisers are asking for that.
Great, thank you. And I don't know, Jan, if you can speak to that from a publisher perspective as well. What your clients are asking for.
Absolutely. I'm happy to hear that there's demand for local content. That's what we produce, and also increasingly producing podcast series in local language and distributing over our own aggregator services, be it Radio Play or Pod Play, especially in the Nordics. So I think we're in that market as well, and we see growth definitely aligned with what we saw in the reports earlier today. When it comes to programmatic again, I think, or trading as a whole, I think there's a big gap between those local small advertisers who still see digital audio as just an extension to their existing broadcast campaigns. And then on the other end, agencies also here represented looking at really advanced sort of podcast sponsorship kind of approaches, or advanced targeting, or programmatic trading, which I've been working a lot on the past 6 to 12 months. And I think we're close to the moment when it's about to take off, but I think there's still work that has to be done to make sure that trading, also automated trading, is actually smooth and easy for buyers.
Thank you. And Diana, I don't know if you want to, I know in your role, you translate global standards for local European markets. If you can share kind of your perspective as well.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely try to leverage the best solutions in market to really put the audience first. We have Publicis Media global partnerships with the main suppliers and providers in the audio space. And we endeavor to really work with them to get direct deals in place to provide that level of transparency that our clients are demanding for. We know that the channel is still sort of in not infancy, but it's growing and it's always evolving. There are some lack of common measurements, and obviously protection in this space is limited in terms of brand safety, or even how do you measure fraud or the media quality metrics that we're used to across other kind of media channels. So we're trying to really leverage those conversations with the partners and to translate that into our local markets here in Europe. We do see a great opportunity when we approach the audio space in the podcasting area. We definitely want to continue to engage with the consumers closely and to really also leverage the programmatic solutions that are in the market, because that allows us to really integrate with other digital buys. We're definitely trying to continue those conversations, and we're trying to really bring that first party approach and direct deals into the conversations as well.
David, I spotted you unmuted yourself there. Did you want to?
I was just going to say, just high level from us, looking at some of the data where we see DV's tags run in audio platforms, we're seeing audio adoption accelerating at speed in Europe in a similar way to Daniel Knapp's kind of presentation alluded to, but also really interestingly in a similar way to the early days of connected TV adoption as well. So we're seeing that kind of parity there where we're seeing that extreme acceleration, but again, it's from a low base. However, signs look promising for the future.
And just thinking about buying habits, so I'd be interested to know, what does a digital audio buying strategy look like at the moment? And interestingly, in particular, how does that differ across different mediums within audio? So obviously podcast, radio, streaming. Perhaps I could throw that one to Andre as well, and then we can, if anyone has anything to add, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, it's really interesting nuances across almost three verticals, if you say, around broadcast, IP radio, podcasting, or music streaming. For podcasting, for example, it's more of a contextual buy. You get some really interesting niche audiences, and if you think about how you listen to podcasting, and like the saying of an echo chamber, but generally you go and you listen to a podcast because it's something you find interesting, you want to find some more information, so you really have that attention. So I think as a strategy and as a buyer, you've really got to think about how you're going to settle into that environment and ensure that it fits with that. Around the kind of IP broadcasting, if you partner with people like Bauer and the other good publishers who are enabling first-party data, then you can use some kind of clever optimizations around the audiences, and also using kind of efficient buying around the kind of listen through rates that you're seeing as well. So that's another thing that's really interesting. Obviously, away from what we do, you've got the host-read direct IO, which obviously is a slower growth area, as Daniel's presentation alluded to, but it's obviously something that if you're looking to get an affiliation with the audience, it can be a powerful way of actually having your brand be noticed in the environments as well.
Great, thanks. That's something I'm very conscious of, is there really is a podcast for everything, I think, and you're so right on that. You can really find people's niche audiences. Just speaking from a personal perspective, I'm absolutely obsessed with the Tour de France. I listen to 3 different podcasts a day. Just any content I could get, I'm obsessed with it. But yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? And how they differ across the different, as you say, audio verticals, what the opportunities are there for advertisers. I don't know if anyone else would like to jump in as well and share their perspective here.
I think some of the trends we've seen, I think this is where market maturity is quite different. I think UK clearly ahead of many of the other European markets, but in the Nordics, I've also seen, instead of host-read ads, a lot of native solutions, product placement kind of approaches where the product actually links to the content and there's a sort of natural fit. And that seems to be gaining popularity. And then some sponsorship podcasts as well, but they of course always have the challenge of making sure they actually are appealing and that they get enough distribution to justify the cost with production.
I don't mind jumping in here as well. Speaking generally around buying habits, buyers, from our understanding and the communication we're having with our client base, still want to authenticate media quality in audio, as they do in other digital environments. However, the approach to audio needs to be bespoke. Challenges, there are a number of challenges. I'll highlight a couple. For example, in podcasts, there's a challenge with regards to downloaded versus streamed, and with the downloaded, you lose some of the real-time data in there. So there's one of the things as an industry we need to overcome to understand how we can authenticate media quality there and also get the data out to inform future optimizations, etc. Now, delivering content level transparency is a key one to build trust in the audio space, to enable greater investment as well. And content level transparency is to deliver or enable brand safety and suitability or contextual targeting. And this is another good example about the approach to audio. Now, for live streaming audio, it requires a similar approach to video-only environments such as connected TV, understanding kind of what metadata around the content can be passed via macros, for example, in VAS macros to the end user, or to the tech providers and the advertisers as well, to enable them to get that content level transparency. However, podcasts are up a slightly different challenge. And the podcasts at the moment have a wide level of content. As you said, there's a podcast for everything, and also the conversation can bounce around from topic to topic. And podcasts are being transcribed at the moment to enable many things, but one of the use cases is classification. And for us, that's great because we have a semantic science division at DoubleVerify that takes an ontological approach to kind of text on page approaches, mainly around websites, to understand the true meaning of the page. We can do that in multiple languages, I think 48 at current count, and we have multiple rules that do that. However, the approach for podcasting needs to be slightly bespoke compared to a web page. A web page tends to have kind of a lot of content around one key topic. However, a podcast transcribes is obviously two people in a flow, in a conversation, and it jumps around from topic and topic. So there are things we need to take, a different bespoke approach to audio and audio environments to enable the customer or our clients, meet our clients' needs, to enable them to authenticate media quality. And these are just a couple of examples to highlight that it isn't a kind of lift and shift from other environments, whether it's video or web, but we need to really think long and hard around, we'll come on to standards later, but how we can deliver the tools that support other areas of our industry and enable them to scale in audio.
I think what David just mentioned is definitely critical for the channels to continue to grow. I think there is definitely that limitation in terms of, okay, how can we provide that full transparency? And we have seen it on CTV as well. I think CTV space has grown so much and way faster than I expected due to the pandemic and everything. But there are solutions that are in place that are trying to solve those kind of key measurement and transparency discussions that we have with our clients. And we see this also happening in the audio space. I think it's fantastic to see that all sides of the industry, they're working on, obviously it comes from the IAB, they're aligning with the IAB content categories, etc., really provide that transparency. And I think as we move into the next year, few years down the line, I think it's going to be it will be able to fully provide that level of transparency, and we will be able to offer our clients and everyone in the industry that sort of the same sort of controls and solutions that we have for different channels to the audio space as well, which is going to be critical definitely for the space to continue to grow, especially in markets where they're less mature as well. So I think it's also really key to continue to see that how's that happening, and those conversations are happening at the local level.
Thanks, guys. And Just taking a bit of a step back, I'd be really interested to hear, and I think Daniel's fantastic presentation really set us up well to have this kind of next conversation, but what do you guys think are the biggest developments that are happening, that are being made in digital audio advertising right now? Daniel touched on mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of investment from big tech, the likes of Facebook, getting interested in this space. There's some really interesting synergies between the audio and gaming space. Just 3 things off the top of my head, but I'd be absolutely fascinated to hear each of your perspectives on what are the biggest developments. Andre, do you want to go first? Everyone was looking very politely.
Feel bad for going first again, but happy to take the lead. We could probably spend a whole kind of hour talking on the latest developments that are happening within the audio space, such as the kind of accelerated growth and the challenges that different partners, players are trying to meet. I'll go through a couple very quickly. So, like Daniel had pointed out, the mergers and acquisitions, so the moves by those bigger players, they're all moves either to increase content or, for our side, improve the workflow, making that content programmatically available. We're looking at iHeart buying Triton, Spotify and their purchase of Megaphone, and Amazon buying Wondery, and I think there was a recent purchase of Art19. So they're all plays around, and be really interesting as they move on and develop. And the next kind of 12 months, what do those purchases look like, and how, for us, especially at Xaxis, how do they play out? How can we access those audiences, those shows, and that content in a way that allows us to add on top of our kind of AI technology and optimization that our traders use? Another one I would really like to touch upon is dynamic audio. So using creative to really personalize the message, adjust to the context that's happening as well. So rather than just a one message going across everything, you can really use the different channels within, like to talk about broadcast, streaming, podcast, and different context, day of the week, etc., to ensure that message is really as relevant as possible to the people that you're trying to read. You've got voice ads that are happening. So for the UK, for example, I think we were looking at 40% smart speaker penetration. The US is even higher, but it's lower in the rest of the EMEA market. So how will that start to affect how people are buying as that goes forward? And like you had mentioned, Catherine, we've got LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all moving in following the success of Clubhouse and releasing kind of those kind of products. So what does that mean? When does it become available to us? What does that look like? Again, these developments are going to really open up the audio space for everybody, because those 3 are about monetization of their audiences. So we all see things start to be released into market. And lastly, one really interesting thing, again, like you mentioned, was how does audio fit into gaming? Gaming's a massive audience that's coming through. So what does that look like again, and how do you fit into that space without it being an interruption? So yeah, I know that was a lot, the different mergers, the dynamic audio, the voice ads, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and their audio releases that are coming in audio and gaming. They're all really interesting developments that we're seeing coming through.
And just a quick follow-up question on that. So on audio and gaming, dynamic creative, the rise of like social audio, are your clients sort of interested and asking you questions about all of these developments, or is it more sort of you're advising them about what's going on in the space? I'm just curious to see how much like this is our world, we're so interested in this sort of stuff, but I'm not sure if clients are asking for these different developments or not.
Like any kind of audience or adoption, you've got your early adopter clients who they want to be in the brand new thing. Like how can we get into like Twitter or LinkedIn and their audio solutions that are coming in, or they want dynamic audio to really push that relevance, or looking at gaming and how the different approaches you can get to that. But most of our clients sit into a solution where we will discuss it with them and how they can utilize that on a kind of strategy level first. But the activation into local markets will then come with the maturity of the solutions once they become wider adopted, and obviously those players themselves going into the clients and pitching their solutions and how it works, and then we just partner with them, consult with them, and how to best to use it.
Cool. We actually did a piece of research last year about SMEs, and something that we've learned is that for the smaller companies, if they want to try something, they kind of need evidence of a bigger company or a similar company doing it. So you're right, there's the sort of really willing early adopters, and I think everybody else is just looking around and waiting to see if it works from someone else before they try it. So yeah, there's definitely a few different approaches. But David, I'd be fascinated to hear your perspective. You're obviously from DoubleVerify, you sit in a slightly different position, but be interested to hear what you think are the kind of biggest developments.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be really boring and echo Andre, but I couldn't, and Daniel as well with his presentation earlier. The consolidation is really exciting, but I think with the acquisitions, we're seeing a few things which hopefully will make it more attractive to buyers to buy. So obviously these acquisitions will drive a few things: greater content, a wider variety of high quality content as well, enabling more audiences to come. With regards to the kind of some of the tech acquisitions, it's consolidating the media landscape as well. So supply isn't as fragmented. So there's more consolidation when it comes to buying channels. So it makes it easier for buyers to buy, which is really important because they want to buy where their audiences are. And with the greater investment of buyers as well, we'll see a push for more industry standards to be adopted as well, because buyers tend to say, we want to, again, we're talking about authenticating media quality and making sure that this inventory is what it says it is. That normally drives with industry standards being brought in. So whether it's the adoption of open measurement, and obviously open measurement 1.3 comes with audibility support as well. So we want to see greater adoption of that and making sure that third-party tags are being accepted by these environments. That all brings confidence. So what we're hoping for in a consolidation is greater content, larger audiences, easier access to supply, and also ways to authenticate media quality in those environments. That should lead to greater investment. But let's just say audio is still really exciting, and developments are happening now are helping drive towards that goal of that kind of 2025 outlook that Daniel presented at.
Great. Jan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, just a comment, I think from a publisher's point of view, I think if I would need to choose 2 or 3 different areas that are really important, I think innovation around content is extremely important. So I think both podcasts, which we have already covered today a lot, but also around commercial radio content. We have initiatives now in Poland with RMF where we are trying to test a bit a personalized experience around radio, where you can actually choose weather or news or host and create a sort of personalized experience for your radio stream. So that's one path. And then in UK, we recently launched Audio Plus, so a subscription-based model, of course, not linked to advertising, but again, another commercial initiative describing that the market definitely is innovating around different monetization models, but also content as a whole. Then I think the second one would be programmatic for me. Somehow I think that's a big change and shift, and I think we're quite close, but it feels like we would still need to work together and make sure that we remove as much complexity as possible by being really transparent and open. But also I think putting a big pressure on the tech platforms on making sure the integrations are really complete and solid, and that it's easy to buy audio inventory with easier audience selection and really good sort of listening KPIs in reports, and getting the basics in place to really scale that opportunity for everyone. So I think these would be my 2 points.
Thank you. I'm fascinated by the idea of personalized radio. I think that sounds incredible. And Diana, would you like to share your perspective as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of what all of you guys have mentioned already, but I think it is important to continue to see how the evolution of measurement and standards translate into the audio buys, and how those are actually evolving to solve for local market challenges as well. I think obviously a lot of the conversations and partnerships are driven in the US, but we definitely need to continue to translate that into the different regions. And we need to continue to push for education in terms of what the channel is, what it brings, the opportunities it has as well. Educate not only our teams and the industry, but also our clients, and for them to understand how can they unlock those unique opportunities that definitely resonate very well with the audiences that they want to engage with. So for sure, it's a space that we are very much looking forward to continue to work in, and we're definitely driving those relationships and conversations here to Europe. So really looking forward to continue to see how this space is evolving, and in partnership with everyone in the industry and from EMEA perspective as well.
Thanks. So I've got one more question before we move to audience questions, and I imagine some of the things we've covered will come up again here, but just to give you guys the opportunity to share your thoughts on this. So what do you think is the one thing that the industry should prioritise to really accelerate audio training across Europe in the next 6 to 12 months? If you could pick one single thing.
To echo David, Jan and Diana, to be honest, around that measurement piece, if we can get the measurement, obviously leads to transparency. Again, as more and more budgets increase, bigger advertisers come on board, start having always on campaigns and really trying to be innovative in their approaches to the audiences. They need that measurement. They need to know where they're running, who's listening, how, and from our perspective, we need to know more about being able to optimize on the different data points, maybe being closer together with the DSPs, the publishers, driving that measurement piece, because I fear that without it, the growth will start to stagnate. To give you a really quick example, last year we were told, video and CTV were the priorities for the different tech partners. So for us, and trying to work with audio and push that further, it was a little frustrating. That is actually turning the corner now in 2021. So now it's back on to, or being reprioritized. That hopefully will allow us to push measurement forward as well.
Again, agreeing. But I think one of the critical things here is measurement is critical. As is authenticated media quality, whether it's around measurement, viewability, brand suitability, brand safety, fraud, geo, etc. But to enable that, we need to make sure the standards are in place. So the measurement is enabled if there's a wide adoption, for example, of the in-app environments where a lot of the audio is being consumed, of open measurement. And we need to make sure that all of us, all stakeholders, whether you're tech, publisher, advertiser, are working in unison to adopt these standards. So we're in a good place when clients are ready to start shifting significant portions of the budget. All of them are in place, and enabling them to have the measurement to say, yes, audio is the right place for our advertising as well. And to do that, I think we've got a couple of transparency, and the industry will need to listen and adopt that. So hearing that the tech providers need to hear that audio is a priority now for these advertisers to make the necessary changes. Publishers also need to hear that to make sure that they can invest time to put in the standards in place, because standardization and transparency are key to accelerate. Otherwise, will lead to brand safety issues or IVT issues when the money moves over, and that'll not be healthy for growth.
Just a short comment, and I couldn't agree more. I think all of that is really important, and for the publishers, and that's where. But I think we also need to spend more time in making sure we get consent from all different third-party distribution partners. And that sounds simple, but it's not that simple when it comes to audio. So there needs to be some development and innovation around that still. So that's definitely an area where we need to do our homework. I think we have enough inventory for now for the programmatic market, and that's fine. But going forward, we need to.
Great. I don't know if Diana, you wanted to cover your perspective as well.
Yeah, no, I think it is critical to have that sort of commonality and measurement in place to really develop the standards. I think it's also important to really understand that the difference of this channel versus even CTV or display or any other programmatic solution. How do you measure success as well? How do you translate some of those metrics into an emerging channel like audio? What are the key areas where you could potentially have those very good opportunities for clients to really achieve KPIs? It doesn't mean are we still looking at the standards that will be translated from other channels like viewability or audio metrics? How is that going to be amalgamated to really get a holistic solution and approach to our clients, and how is that going to look like in the future year or so? So it's going to be something really critical as well to look at.
Thank you. So I'm conscious we're just on 12 o'clock, so I'll cover one of the questions through from the audience. And it just, a huge theme of our conversation is education and like measurement and standards and us getting things right so that people are more willing to dip their toe into the audio industry. And we are seeing huge growth, which is amazing. But there was a question here about where is digital audio spend coming from? I'd be interested to hear if anyone can share their thought on that. Where are we expecting this money to come from in the future?
Again, I can give a buy-side perspective like Diana will do, I'm sure. But you've got different teams that sit in the agencies. I'm sure the agency listeners will agree. You know, you've got your AV teams who will be part buyers, and that's looking at how's digital audio fit with audio itself. Don't forget that they're can be two different audiences, especially when you move into podcasting. And what we've seen, a lot of the audiences can be cord cutters, so it can be hard to reach them in other areas. We've also done some really interesting work in markets that have proven kind of the GRP reach of those audiences against traditional radio. So you don't want to take away, but how do you fit it so you're reaching your total audience for the advertiser on where they're listening? And there's also a couple of other interesting places, like how do you fit everything together across the media mix? So stop siloing everything, but how do you touch that person on the journey? And again, we're doing some really interesting work on putting it all together, whether that's audio, digital at home display, video, and really reaching them when they're in the moment and they're most receptive to advertising.
Yeah, absolutely agree with Andre. And I think we have seen on the back of Daniel's presentation, the channel is growing so much that naturally investment is going to also shift towards audio. And I think clients, as the channel grows, are definitely looking at how can they better engage with their audiences. And if it is via new emerging channels, they will continue to do. And obviously, in Publicis' best interest to continue to collaborate with everyone in the industry to continue to provide those solutions for our clients as well. It is important to really, in terms of the spend and investment, it's definitely going to continue to happen over the next year or so, as we have seen on the back of Daniel's presentation as well. So it is a very good opportunity for everyone to really continue to understand how the channel is going to evolve. But there are some challenges around it, so we need to continue to have an open discussion with everyone from the buy side, supply side, everyone that is providing like that the spaces to approach the standards, measurement, and solve for some of those challenges to fully unlock the potential of the space.
Great, thank you so much. So I think that's all we have time for. The last thing I will say is just a huge thank you to Andre, David, Jan and Diana. It has been absolutely fascinating talking to you and learning a bit more about the wider European market, how exciting audio is across the whole of Europe. Yeah, thank you.